Good morning and welcome again to Thought for the Day. Today I'm going to be telling you about Hagar as we continue in our series of men and women from the Old Testament. Now we first meet Hagar in Genesis chapter 16. We find there that she is Sarai's maidservant. She's an Egyptian. And we also find that at this stage, Sarai and Abram are old and still childless. So Sarai thinks that perhaps God needs a helping hand and suggests that Hagar should marry Abram. And so Abram takes her as his wife, and before long, she discovers that she's pregnant. She then starts to despise Sarai. And Sarai is very upset by this, and she blames Abram for this upset. And Abram tells her that she can treat Hagar as she wishes. So she starts to treat her really badly, so badly, in fact, that Hagar decides to run away. And I'm just going to start reading from verse 7 of chapter 16. The angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? She said, I am fleeing from my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her. The angel of the Lord also said to her, I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said to her, behold, you are pregnant and shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. He shall be a wild donkey of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he shall dwell over against all his kinsmen. So she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, You are a God of seeing. For she said, truly, here I have seen him who looks after me. Therefore, the well was called Beer Lahai Roi. It lies between Kadesh and Bered. Hagar was met by the living God who sees her. She goes back to Sarai and Abraham, and she has her son Ishmael. And the story moves on now a number of years. The next time we meet Hagar and Ishmael is in chapter 21, and by this stage Ishmael is about 16. And Abraham and Sarah now have their own son Isaac, as God had promised they would. And when Isaac's about 2 years old, they have a great celebration for his weaning. And at this celebration, Sarah sees Ishmael laughing, and she's very angry and upset about this, and she goes to Abraham and she tells Abraham that he needs to throw Hagar and Ishmael out of the house. And although Abraham doesn't want to do this, God tells him that he should do as Sarah has said. And we're going to break in at verse 14 of chapter 21. So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, along with the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the child under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite him, a good way off, about the distance of a bow shot, for she said, Let me not look on the death of the child. And as she sat opposite him, she lifted up her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the boy. And the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, What troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Lift up the boy, and hold him fast with your hand, for I will make him into a great nation. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. And God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. Hagar has a God who hears her and hears her son. A God who sees and a God who hears. As I've been reading through this story of Hagar, those two things have really jumped out at me. Hagar met a God who hears and a God who sees. And I find that really assuring, because not only is the God who heard and saw Hagar relevant to her story, it's the same living God that we have, the living God who hears us and sees us. Now, I've never found myself in a situation like Hagar found herself in. I'm very thankful for that. But this story doesn't just tell us that God would hear us and see us in those situations, and we know he will, but we can be sure that God hears and sees us in whatever situation we find ourselves, whether times are good or bad. And I think that's a great comfort as we go through our day-to-day lives. Perhaps you are facing something difficult. Maybe life's really good. But isn't it great to know that regardless of the situations we face, regardless of how we're feeling, God sees us and God hears us. And just like with Hagar and Ishmael, if you are in difficulty, if your situation is desperate, you can cry out and can know that God will hear you. If you find yourself somewhere and you think there's no one around who knows you, no one around who cares, God does. He sees you and he hears you. I do pray that these thoughts will really encourage you today and that you have a really good day.